The arc is wrapping up. There's still a little bit left in this, in all of this, the biggest arc so far in Black Clover, and pretty much the wrap up for all the ties into previous arcs. There's a lot of mystery moving forward, and I want to go over like a lot of discussions, like a lot of kind of like looking at where the characters are now, and like what exactly the arc affected, favorite parts of the arc and whatnot. But I want to wait until those last couple bits because there's still a little bit left. I imagine probably like another 2 chapters of just wrapping up, and then kind of when we enter that period in between arcs, I'm guessing there'll be like a handful of chapters just to kind of create that gap between this arc, the Elf Resurrection arc, and whatever comes next. But one thing that definitely we can look at now is what exactly could come of losing his elf boost. There's still a lot of theories over whether or not Yuno was actually the elf soul, of Licht Tedia's child, and maybe he just kind of grew up with amongst humans, so he just kind of like has a human mentality instead of like the way the elves think. I still think that would be really cool because I think that'd be a good kind of bridge between the elves and the humans that kind of really also help them fully come together. But there's still a possibility that the elf soul of them just didn't awaken fully, or whatever it is. That's not the important thing that I'm looking at. I want to talk about Yuno losing the form at least permanently. Maybe he can use it as like a buffed form because like Asta, he had he could use his black form twice in a day, and then like throughout later in the arc, pushing himself, he's like, I can use it now 2.5 times a day. I'd like to believe maybe he can use it at least 3 times a day. And you can kind of look at that like maybe like 3 times a day or once in a prolonged, like pretty long state, because he can use it short periods of time, at least seemingly. I feel like some of the chapters just feel that like the way that him and Yuno were in their forms just because of how fast paced some of the fights are in reality. But looking at that, let's say that Yuno could, is similar. Like, okay, he can use Spirit Dive 3 times a day, but like, what if like once a day or once within those he could, put an elf boost on it? Because throughout the arc, Yuno and Asta were still keeping up with each other. They're still like matching each other in speed and power and just enhancing themselves in their own categories, but still were able to keep neck and neck. The thing that differentiated them was Yuno, after getting the elf form boost, he had a higher quantity of magic and stamina than what Asta was able to do with his own stats. Because you see like a lot of the panels where they're tag teaming an opponent, they're just neck and neck the whole time. But Asta would run out of his black form and he would get drained and get exhausted, while Yuno could still keep in his form much longer. And that alone presents a potential of Yuno's capabilities for the future, because you can kind of look at that with Yuno. And Yuno has his own goals. Like, obviously him and Asta are rivals, but he still wants to get his own accomplishment. And similar to how Asta's like, how can I overcome the fact that I can't use Mana Skin? He looked at what he knew and what he could do, created his black. Well, he didn't create the black form. He learned how to use it, because he was like, okay, Mana Skin, I know the concept. Key sensing, I know how I could try and like figure out the anti magic and figure out how to try and use it my own way, similar to Mana Skin. And then he knew the black form was a thing, so he kind of combined those 3 concepts and figured out how to use it. And then saw the black form and was like, how can I match that up? Because that was the big gap that differentiated between him and Asta. But now Asta can look at that and be like, because will look at the form and like the elf boost and be like, this is something that I could, if I could learn how to harness, will put me ahead of Asta and further push him along his his goal to want to become Wizard King. Whereas Asta, imagine you could have a similar thing though. Like when Asta first got his black form, definitely was just, you don't need to like even go into like a long drawn out aspect of his of a chapter of him just going over him like reflecting off Asta's form to know that he's like, I need to be able to catch up to them. It just is, it's part of like who he and Asta are. They're constantly like competing, looking at what the other's doing, and like figuring out how they can cover the gap anytime any of them ever get ahead. And Asta could see something like just got another big boost, how can I catch up? And in his mind, like, say, this is a theoretical layout, like say Asta's like, okay, has this kind of like powered up form, or at least again potential. This is again completely theoretical. They assume learned how to like go into this elf form, and sustain it for a short period of time at will. Just kind of like put on the table of, okay, he could do this. Imagine in Asta's mind, he's like, okay, yeah, he's got this elf power within him. How could I catch up to him? And we know, with the devils, there's expansions on them. Asta just had like a revelation on the 5-leaf Black Clover Grimoire, it having more significance. He's gonna probably look more into it after this arc, I imagine. But he could easily be like, well, I know this demon is in there. What if I try and talk to him? What if I try and communicate with him? There are so many aspects, I think, that between Asta and anytime one of them makes an accomplishment, they could use that, not only to further progress, again, like looking at it, like, how can I take this and make it better and keep pushing? But also, anytime one of them is able to get, one of these accomplishments, it could easily reflect over into the other one of, okay, this, Yuno doing this, how could this be an effect to Asta to also push Asta? And same way with Asta towards because that is a very logical way of how is able to kind of create this idea of spirit dive and one of like intake spirit magic merge with Bell to create that form, whereas Asta could do a similar thing to kind of like communicate with the demon, and that'd be really cool to see. Just because even though we're 200 chapters in, and Tabata has talked about like he's fully like fine with going up to like Naruto and One Piece levels of series size, hundreds more, which is logical and potentially like he could do it. Like we're at 200 already plus chapters. We've only done stuff within the Clover Kingdom, so we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I'm very intrigued to figure out where this could go. I'm still looking right now at like what I could talk about that won't conflict with like my want to wait until the arc is fully over before going into discussions. This is still one of them. I want to look at a couple other things, like what exactly characters could get boosted up. Like for instance, like more into, actually I already did a video on like Geldry and Revchi and like their magic tools. I want to do a follow-up video on that when we find out if like they somehow get become part of the Clover Kingdom. I doubt they can or would, because Goldry is like a little bit shaky, but Revchi is just a straight criminal. And one thing is just kind of like glancing over, especially for that, is because he was fine stealing grimoires, and it's not brought up in canon from what I remember, but Tabata brings it up in a Q&A that like stealing grimoires is like a war crime pretty much in the Black Clover universe. It's just a straight like one of the highest taboos you can do, because like the grimoire is like part of them. That actually would become like an extra thing that's really interesting about like Asta having wanted to give back the grimoire to Licht, and then Licht being like, no, yours now, you keep it. But anyway, drop a comment below what you think about this. Again, it's a very like well developed system that you can kind of like forever loop in theory between Asta and Yuno. Whenever one of them accomplishes something, how is the other going to be able to use that in their own advantage to catch up, or develop their own means to cover that gap? I'm very intrigued to see what Asta is able to accomplish out of this. If Yuno is able to, Yuno doesn't even really need to like, oh, I need to get this form. Asta just needs to be like, Yuno is way more powerful, like in so many categories during that because of this. What if I figured out a way to do something similar? And then he, again, uses his key sensing, gets maybe into like a tranquil state, and then learns how to communicate with the demon within his grimoire. That would be so cool. Anyway, like I said, comment below. I really appreciate if you thumbs up the video, befriend the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. Man, I appreciate everyone who's already subscribed, and I thank you all for listening. Bye.